Hey guys, do you ever had a character in your tabletop RPG games, either being D&D, Pathfinder, or for my case, Savage Worlds, when the character you created, you love it so much you want to use it in most games you play, but sometimes thanks to the system change, if you jump from system to system, you have trouble maybe difference in how to keep the character the same, but with the mechanics balance it out properly. I have had this problem a bit this year because this year I've been a lot focused on both D&D, a lot more D&D play for me, and I coming from the system of Savage Worlds where I was starting. I'm still playing to this day, and this would have the most knowledge. I also played for a while now the Pokemon ttrpg, but technically there you don't really have other races or species, as I should say, as you have in D&D and Savage Worlds. So for example, if you find an orc, your character you created in D&D, and maybe an avian character for your Savage World, but you love both, but you want to use them in this other system. Now the backstory of the character can be the same, but how to build up mechanically wise could be slightly different thanks to the system changes. So here's what I would like to talk about, so how so far I have been following about this, and what things that you should think about when taking like D&D and Savage World, which is the two systems I have knowledge of. I'm not yet able to play Pathfinder. Maybe I'll start this later this year, or maybe next year. I maybe get a chance to play that system. And so let's get into this. And first of all, we need to establish that D&D and Savage World are completely different systems to use. And the way of building the character is also very different. The most different, or the more easiest different to establish here, is in Savage Worlds, you never use the D20. You never use it. That is very much, if it ever is used, it is mostly environmental things that the DM might use it for, instead of using cards. Because most, like with Savage Worlds, is card based. You draw cards to see who starts in a fight, and that is renewed every round, instead of like in D&D you roll initiative and that's set. This is how you start all the rounds, but in Savage World you draw cards to see who starts every round, and that goes on until the fight is over. But we are now focusing more on the creative process of both D&D and Savage Worlds. So let's take one of my character, for instance, which is let's go with one of my orcs I created, which is Ornthak Axetooth. He's a very broad orc for his species. In the campaign I created him, I actually created him as and war orc, which is the similar. They're more stronger and resilient than regular orcs, but thanks to they were bred to be for war only, their lifespans are way shorter than normal orcs. And roughly an orc can live to like 75 years. These guys only live for, I think it was 55, 60 years, and they cannot go, biologically cannot go further. They really need a strong God's blessing to be able to live after 60. So the character's backstory is going to be the same, but now we have to figure out in the way of creating it in a way of balance. And I like my orcs to be very much physical. So this would be a fighter or barbarian in D&D, and focus more on melee attacks in Savage World, because we don't really have classes in Savage Worlds. We have just what you like to produce more, and you go from there. So in the first of the core things in both settings, in D&D we have abilities, which gives you modifiers, which then goes to your skills and stuff like that. And Savage Worlds we have attributes. We have 5 attributes. And then we have skills that are connected to these attributes, just as it would be in D&D. So this is more, and in D&D, this part is simple, because you can either use a point-buy system, which you have I think it was 70 points, something like you can buy the scores on your abilities, and now focus on, okay, which class do you want? Like I said, we're gonna go with Barbarian. Okay, you need more like Constitution and Strength here, because that is a core feature of a Barbarian, and with these abilities and racial class features and stuff like that. And so like the stat blocks here in D&D is gonna be quite simple. And if you don't want to use the point buy system, you have the dice roll system, where you take 4 d6s, roll, and then you take the 5 d6 and take the 4. I haven't done a D&D character in a while, so this is like, you take your dice, you roll them, and then take the highest rolls and take away the lowest one. So that is the 3 highest. It has to be 3 highest because you can only get up to 18. So 6, 12, 18. Yeah. So 4 d6s and take the 3 highest dice there and add that to a specific score. Your higher roll, of course, you're going to take the score you want, or you know is the best feature to use for this class and this race. And also depending on which 5e you're using, if you're using the 5e from 2014 or the 5.5e, which it was in 2024, that could depend on how you want to also mix the points you either roll or you buy. In Savage Worlds, you start with the 5 core attribute, which is agility, smarts, spirit, strength, and vigor. And they are started as a d4. We don't do points in Savage Worlds, we do the dice instead. You can go from d4 up to d12. And all these core attributes, which only are 5 of anyway, so with this 5 you start as a d4, then you have 5 points to spend to upgrade that die type. For instance, you can go spend all 3 points, and now you have go from the d4 you go to d6, d8, d10, or you can take 4 and have a d12. And if you have a special race like orcs or stuff like that has natural strength already, which we're gonna go into, then you can actually have pluses to that d12, which is a positive. I think it's maximum +4. Also depending on which size category the creature or the species you're using is. And that's the core part of any build. So now you think, okay, what will be good here and what will be good here? And for a melee combat guy, like strength, constitution, and dexterity is good in D&D. And I would say focus mostly on agility and vigor and a bit on strength. You don't really have to focus on spirit and smarts if you don't want to, depending on how balancing you want to make the character, but you can always focus on agility and vigor first, and then add like the last point maybe on strength, even though the strength sounds pretty good. Strength and vigor are not technically linked to any skills in Savage Worlds. Vigor helps to decide how tough your character are. And strength is also, okay, how much damage which damage die do you use to roll the damage, and how much you can carry. For instance, like a D4, with a D4 strength, you can carry up to 20 pound max. And I think there's 60, 40 and doubles every die type you get. Which is pretty nice. Because like in Savage World, a D6 is what is considered an average person. So an average person is like, okay, you can carry 40 pounds and before you start the struggle. Which is nice. And then we have our skills, which now are added to all of the characters, no matter which system you use. In D&D, you have a set of skills. Now, depending on which class you use and which species you use, to have some proficiency in which of these skills, which now your bonus is going to be plus what your modifier on your ability scores are, and then your proficiency bonus. But in Savage Worlds, you start with 5 core skills. Just like attributes, you start with 5, which are already a D4. And those skills are athletics, common knowledge, notice, persuasion, and stealth. Then you get 12 points to either spend on those core skills or add more skills to your list. And you will have, depending on which, if you only go with core book, you have set there. Some of the companion books give you more skills because it's more for the setting, added some extra skills. Like fantasy has the alchemy skill to use, which technically is more fantasy version of weird science, or a bit of weird science and regular science skill. And we have superpower companions that has skills that are more linked to your superhero persona, your powers. But that's a different topic, and we can discuss that in another video. So now you can now have 12 points you can spend. And each point is linked also to how the skill linked to your attributes. For instance, if you have a D8 in agility, it means and up to a D8 in athletics, now it's going to cost 1 point to get. If you then want to have your athletics be a D10 or D12, that's going to cost you 2 points instead of 1 because you go above the linked attribute. So you have to think about that clearly, and also like you have so much other skills you can buy. So that also wins. What is this character about? And I'm mainly the basic melee focused person. So what I would like right now is I would like the fighting skill and intimidation skill, because he's gonna be a big brute that's gonna swing with an axe or a sword or just his fists. So he's gonna be good at fighting. He's gonna be doing athletics and of course intimidation. Which now, if I'm not raising his spirit die any, that means I can only buy for 1 point intimidation D4, then that's going to cost me 2 points afterwards, and how much I want to raise that. So I need to think clear of that. And also like, okay, fighting die is like how good you are to hit a person. And it's also gonna be a key thing to when we now see how well you can block a person for hitting you. And of course, fighting is going to be his main focus. So I want to have that as high as possible I can go. If I don't have a D8 in agility, I can have a D8 for 3 points, because D4, D6, D8. And then I'm going to spread that out as much as I can to kind of balance it a bit, but also like, okay, and the rest of the balance is when all the skills are bought first, is going to be the focus on his mobility to fight. Then I will have the rest of the points I have left, try to spread that out a bit, just because like he has been around for a while. He may not be high rank in the ranking system or high level in D&D, but he's gonna have some experience. So I want to think that out a bit in Savage World, which now gonna get how much have he seen and stuff like that. That could be common knowledge. Races like, okay, I know this place a bit. I know what's the deal up here. Okay, I can read that person. Because we don't really have insight checks in Savage World. I would say that was more a common knowledge to kind of figure out, is this guy bullshitting right now? So we have now bottle skills a bit, and now we have also set the skill points what we think in Barbarians' case is the best way to have it. You in the D&D's case, you have Barbarians have, so like you can choose 3 or 4 out of a small list, or there's 2 out of like 4 or 5 skills to have proficiency in that, which many people are going to go with athletics and intimidation because, yeah, you're a strong, scary dude, and you get angry. Brr. And then we have the racial traits, which I'm not going into. And with orcs in D&D, here's what like I love with D&D, but also like the separate D&D from Savage World. In D&D, you have technically a set what they can do, and that's is pretty simple to follow in most cases. Depending on which books you're using, you have a bit different. But in like for 2024, I have seen is orc has relentless endurance, which means one time they can go, instead of going to 0 hit point, go to 1 hit point, which keeps them in a fight for at least 1 more hit, unless they get healed by the cleric. And adrenaline rush, which may technically this is a species like gets one of the rogue abilities for free just by being an orc. That means you can do a dash action as a bonus action instead of just doing as an action, which is cool because it means, oh, a barbarian that actually can dash and then attack, that is awesome. In Savage Worlds, there are stat blocks for orcs, there are, but usually they are considered non-playable characters, which means they usually are the monsters you throw at the party instead of the party being ones. Now we have in fantasy campaign, you do have a small ancestor thing for to be able to play it, but depending on how you read the words, the GM can have a bit different things, because in how I've read the words from the fantasy companion is that this example is still technically for races that are unplayable characters, and if you like want to play this race, which is you're allowed to, you still have to balance it out a bit. Now you can skip that part either way because they have like it's not a big balance difference within this, because but I probably should take this a bit in dissecting a bit. In Savage Worlds, when you have a race that's not human, they have something called a positive racial abilities and negative racial abilities. And this has different point values depending on how good they are and what they do for the race. And most are 1 to 2 points, but some can cost 3 to 4 points. And in fantasy, you actually have something that costs up to 10 points, a positive. Now, if you create a race, you usually have to balance the positive racial traits with the negative in point values. So if you create a race with 5 points in positive racial traits, then you need to have 5 points in negative racial traits, which is hard sometimes to do because you have so many options in positive things, but the list of negative is not as wide, so sometimes you have to do more of just the same thing to balance the point system, depending on how wild you go with the positives. If you're very careful, you don't have to spend too much points, and I'm pretty bad at that. I like to get most of my races I create in Savage Worlds has minimum of 10 points in positive, which means you need to have 10 points in negative. So you have to balance that a bit, because which negative will you put onto these characters, because later on you still have something called hindrances. And if you have that hindrance you thought of first as a racial trait, you can't have that again as a regular hindrance. You need to buy something else. So yeah, in my case and how I read, okay, if you want to have these examples that I have, you need to tweak it to be balanced, which mostly in what the cases I've read and looked through of the examples, like you need to either add another small negative trait to the race or take away some of the smaller positive ones. But again, that is up to how the GM interpreted the wordings of those sentences. I interpreted, okay, this is technically still on below characters. This is just examples. If you want to play them, you need to balance them out. But for my Twitch streams group, I let them have the one that played on Aquarius. I let her just have the stat was said in the book. She didn't have to tweak anything because I felt like I wanted to have a bit more how the book played into this, and what already said, that wasn't even tweak any of the monsters of technically was supposed to fight, but they managed to avoid fight entirely, which is shocking. But also I love it when it happens, because you just spend maybe you like normally I spend hours creating the encounters, but I also leave a way for my players to either get away with whilst fighting or just avoid the fight entirely. And sometimes my home players, they do it because you gave us an option, we don't want to fight, we're gonna try to run, and they have succeeded so far. And that, here and there, continue with how creating this orc. So now we're taking a balance, and normally orc are usually they get some bonuses with the attributes and minus to the attributes normally. Some of them gets, in some of the cases they get like low light vision, which is okay. Yeah, you have the penalty in darker illuminated places, but pitch dark you still get the full penalties. And the positive is okay. Yeah. Instead of starting with a strength D4, you're starting with a strength D6, and also a vigor D6. So it means you can spend more points at agility and maybe like spirit to be able to raise, to be able to have the intimidation skill up for a bit cheaper. Because two of the core attributes, which is not linked to any skills, is now one die type higher before we even buy the point for upgrading those dice, which is nice. But in other hand, they usually get what is stereotypically for orcs in any system so far, what I know, is they kind of are dumb, right? So in cases like this, okay, yeah, you have a minus to intelligence something, and a smart roll is with a -2, or if you take a more severe penalty because you don't want to buy more hindrances, negative positive traits in Savage Worlds, you get a -4 to any smart roll, which is pretty bad, because mostly what you have in Savage Worlds is a +4 and +4 or a -4 in bonuses and negatives to any roll. Usually, there are some times where the GM can give you more, or gives the situation worse, like in negatives and positives. So we build this up. We have about, like I'm thinking in the book of example for an orc, they have roughly about 8 points in positives and 7 points in negatives. So now most things would be done here, especially in D&D, because now you just create when you have other skills, which is the save throw bonus for the classes in this bit, and then you have the racial trait, what it gives you and stuff, what that gives for bonuses and stuff like that, and what language it speaks, for instance. Then you go to the column that usually says bonds, ideals, flaws, and personality traits, which is there is just more of flavor wise. After you have pointed the skills and wrote down what the class feature gives you and what the racial feature gives you, you're technically right now in D&D, you're just working on the profile picture of this orc. In Savage Worlds, on the other hand, you're not done yet. Because now you need to buy hindrances, which is technically still the flaws of your character, but instead of just doing this like a flavor pile, or this is the sour spice you didn't really want on you, like in this little sandwich we're making. In Savage World, you need to buy hindrances, and this can have they can just have like a role play flaw in your character, but it can also have a mechanical flaw. For instance, we have something. If you can be loyal, that is flavor-wise, because you're loyal to your party. It means you will sacrifice and stay with them when shit hits the fan, no matter what, because you're loyal to this person, to this group, to this person. That's why it's a hindrance, but it's a minor hindrances. So it's not too much gonna take off the role playing, but it's gonna be there, and that's just a role playing thing. Then we have something let's call mean, which I think also is a minor hindrance. Like, okay, you talk with a foul mouth, you look very naughty, you don't do anything for free, stuff like that. And with mean, you get a -2 to persuasion rolls. You are bad at persuasion with this hindrance. So if you roll a 4, okay, now that's a 2. And that has a mechanical effect on your characters when they try to do something, like try to get the price of this sword lowered a bit. Even if it's just a bit, you still have to roll a persuasion, and that means -2 to that roll. And if you have, and usually if you have a hindrance that has a minus to that, you can't have something that in Savage World we call an edge that gives you positive to that. And you can read that more if you buy the books of Savage World, which I really recommend you do, because it's a fun system with a slight more faster pace than D&D, because you advance after every single session, and it's like, yeah, go fast, go hard, have fun, and you don't have to wait 3 or 4 sessions before you advance to the next stage. And the math is a bit more simplified. You don't have to roll as many dice that you could do in D&D. Like some of the weapons or some of the spells has a lot of dice, which in Savage World you don't really have. Even with the even if you took the superpower companion into consideration, at most, at the newer version at least, what we have today, you roll about 5 die tops. 6 maybe if you get something we in Savage World system calls a race. This is when you hit your opponent with the 4 above their so-called defense points. Then you get some color race. That means you add a d6 to damage. So it's roughly 5 to 6 dice tops. But indeed, that can be more than that, and then you have a lot of pluses, a lot of things added to it with modifiers and stuff like that. So that can be a bit chunky with math. Savage Worlds simplified it a bit, which is thankful, but that can take a lot of time, but in Savage Worlds, not too much. And since we have already talked about hindrances having both, I guess, a role-playing aspect of it and a mechanical opposite to it, let's take what we know has the edges. And this is technically the boon, like the bonuses you get to your character, as well as with the post that you already get, but you can also buy. And that is, you can buy 2 edges from the start, then every advancement you can buy 1 more if the requirements are met, of course. For every edge has like some form of requirement. You need to have about 1 edge before or stuff like that. And for one of the, in this case, we're having a form of brute. You may want to have the edge called brawler. But then again, in that case, you need to be a novice rank. You need to have a strength at D8 and vigor D8, and that means you get a +1 to your toughness, and you do strength plus a D4 when you swing with your fist or headbutting, or whatever you want to, whatever part of your body you're attacking your opponent with. And that can go up when you hit a rank season to a bruiser. That means an extra +1 to your toughness, and now you do a strength plus D6. But that is something you can combine if you want to be not just a brawler, but he actually knows karate, Thai boxing, whatever. He's a martial artist. And with martial artist, that is, you get +1 to hit through his defenses, and do strength plus D4 if you're only using your body as the weapon. And if you have a brawler, you actually add that together, but it's not like you have 2 D4s. No, you get the upgraded die instead of having 2 D4s. You will be strength D6. And that will upgrade if you buy the upgrade for a brawler, then upgrade for martial arts, which is martial warrior. Which means, in sense, if you have both bruiser and martial warrior, when you hit somebody with just your fist, you have the strength die plus a D10 to damage, which could be fun. And I would say most of the edges here, there are background edges that's helping you with stuff that you maybe got through your journey before you got where you are. You have combat actions that help you with combat most specifically. You have power edges. That is mostly focused if you're a spellcaster. You have professional edges, and that is like if you're a thief, you're an investigator. If you want to have a guy that's a MacGyver guy, which is, oh yeah, you can find scraps and stuff anywhere and create from a grenade, improvised grenade basically. Then you have social edges, which could help you when try to, oh yeah, I know you have a reputation, your street knowledge about this area is good. You have weird edges, which I don't really know why they called it the weird edges, but it has something like, oh yeah, beast friendly or stuff like that, which you can add a pet to your character. But buying edges means you need to have first bought the hindrances, which I talked about a bit before. And for each minor hindrances, you get you get 2 minors for 1 point or 1 major for 1 point, and you can I have a up. Okay, no. Wait, Patrick, back up. 1 minor hindrance gets 1 point, and the major gets 2. And you need 4 points to buy 2 edges. 2 points for each edge. Now we're back on track. But we also have an opportunity here for something else. If you buy the hindrances, you could decide not to buy an edge. For instance, for an order, because you're already taking half positive traits already. But you also have negative, so you add more negative, but you don't necessarily buy the positive for an edge. Instead, what you can do, you can spend the edge points to increase your attributes, or for instance, maybe a skill. And if you want to, and the same applies there. If you want to do an attribute and die up, you spend 2 of the points you would have to buy an edge, and you can do that with all 4 points to increase an attribute twice or 2 attributes once. I think that's the same. I think with the skill it's almost like the minus. As long as it's not above the attribute it's linked to, it's 1 point. If it's above the attribute is linked to, it's 2 points. You can do that instead of buying an edge, because you can focus that with your advancements if you want to. So in a case like here, it's like there are different ways of building this character, but you could technically do the same, but it's gonna be, mechanical wise, gonna be way much difference. Mostly because in D&D things are a little bit more set in how the mechanical things you can do are met. Within Savage World, you can tweak it a bit more than you normally could in D&D, because you don't have, this, you can only choose these 2 to be proficient out of the 4 choices. In Savage World, it's more like, no, you have this much point to spend, and now you can tweak your skills, you can buy it no more, because you don't really have proficiency in most things. That taking what you get the edges for. And then we have, of course, the gear. That depends on, like, okay, how strong are you? How much can you then carry? And then you have your money and stuff like that. And then you're ready to go. The characters are mechanically built. And I cannot promise you gonna see or even feel the difference, because you probably will. Because even though the same character, same backstory, the mechanics of it has been tweaked, and I would say you should try both D&D and Savage World to see where this character actually fit, or like, could you make the same character for D&D work in Savage World, or vice versa. I actually created one character that is for Savage World and for D&D, and so far I haven't managed to play him in D&D settings, because this is a homebrew, and so far since I'm using D&D Beyond and the free version of D&D Beyond, I only have 6 characters, and I cannot create a homebrew there. But if I just sit down with a DM for a campaign and play this character, he can help me say what I can not have. And I'm taking all sources I can find on the internet that have a similar build already, to use that, and already say to the DM, is this okay for me to use? Because you always should have the DM's permission, no matter what you create in homebrew settings of D&D, or you want to create your own race in Savage World. Always ask the DM what he will allow this race to have and not to have. And that's how I feel like the difference you could still do the same character, but the difference will be the most the mechanic and how you build it. With D&D, you are more of a set way of building, which in Savage World, I would say you have slightly more freedom to build the mechanical stuff. But that's up to most of you to decide if you feel the same as me, because this is just my opinion and how I so far feeling with at least these 2 systems. I might do a follow-up video on this if I ever get a chance of playing Pathfinder, because that would be another system for me to learn and create characters, and maybe I make this character in this system and see how it turns out. But I would say this, if you guys watching this video and you're very interested in playing tabletop RPG but don't really know where to do it, or don't really have much of your friends having the same interest, you can always Google Spelens Hus in Malmö, because I can't really remember the address right now. And you can always join us. We're always happy for new people to join. If 2 first visits are free, then we ask you to become a member. And for kids it's 40 crowns, and for adults, which I think is 15 or 18 or up, that's 100 crowns a year. And we have a Discord where you can find groups and you can search for people to join your campaign if you have one. And we have different systems. Like we have Pokemon right now, we have Savage World, which mostly I run. We have D&D, we have Pathfinder, we have Star Wars. I know one guy had Fallout one time. And even with D&D, we have someone that's actually doing the 3.5 edition, which sounds awesome, but I have been having my place full. So if you're very interested in trying out playing D&D, Savage World, Pathfinder, and don't really have a place to go, Spelens Hus in Malmö do welcome you with open arms. And we are always looking forward to new people. We will help you create your character, we will help you get setting, and like I said, 2 first visits are free. Then we'll ask you to become a member, and if you do decide to come and check it out, and you talk to one of the board members, just mention that Patrick, aka Oxman, gave you the tip, and I will hopefully see you there. But this is all for me today, and yeah guys, if you like this video, please hit like and subscribe, because I'm close to get that 50 subs, and when I can hit the 50 sub, I can also start doing streams on my phone. And I think I will set it up to my first stream being a playthrough of Digimon, since I think that's better for streaming than playthrough episodes. So until then guys, have a nice weekend, and see you guys in the next video. Bye!